November 22nd, 1924, 11:47 p.m. Saint-Léonard de Port-Maurice, Quebec. Arthur Sicard descends the wooden stairs into his workshop for the 4,713th time. He knows the number because he's counted. 48 years old, hands stiff from cold. The kerosene lamp throws shadows across 30 years of failure, mounted on the walls like trophies of obsession. A farmer who cannot let go of an idea he had when he was 18. The workshop smells of machine oil and snow-dampened wood. Outside, Montreal winters pile snow higher each year as the city grows, as horse-drawn sleighs give way to automobiles trapped in drifts. Up on street level, his wife Marie has long since stopped asking when he'll finish. His children know better than to disturb Papa when he's down there, wrestling with the thing that's consumed 3 decades of their lives. On the workbench, the latest iteration, a scaled model, maybe 1/8 actual size. Metal auger blades mounted to a rotating drum. Behind it, a fan housing that should, theoretically, create enough force to propel snow. The concept crystallized watching a wheat thresher 30 years ago, seeing grain stalks pulled in, separated, thrown clear. Simple enough, except snow isn't wheat. Summer, 1894. Arthur Sicard is 18 years old, working his father's dairy farm. The Saint-Léonard territory stretches flat and agricultural, a world away from the Montreal that's beginning to sprawl westward. The Sicard family comes from generations of millers, men who understood gears and mechanisms, who built the machinery that ground wheat into flour. Arthur inherited that mechanical intuition along with the family name. The thresher moves through the field like some prehistoric beast. Time equals 350 milliseconds, all rotating drums and whirring blades. Feed the wheat in one end, watch the separated grain pour out the other. The chaff dispersed to the wind. Arthur stops working, stares, thinks about the previous winter. Quebec winters don't negotiate. They arrive in November and they stay until April, burying roads in snow measured by feet, not inches. Making milk deliveries becomes an exercise in desperation. Horses struggling through drifts, wheels frozen solid, routes that should take hours, consuming entire days. Some roads close completely, simply disappear beneath the snow until spring. The city relies on men with shovels. Thousands of them. 25 cents an hour to move what nature dumps overnight. What if? What if you could adapt this principle? What if instead of wheat stalks, you pulled in snow? What if instead of separating grain, you simply threw it clear, moved it somewhere else, opened the roads? The idea takes root. Arthur has no way of knowing it will take 31 years to make it work. Understanding why it took 3 decades requires understanding what Arthur was attempting. This wasn't a simple machine. The snowblower had to solve problems that didn't exist in grain threshing. Snow compresses. Pack it tight enough, and it becomes ice. The auger blades that pulled in light wheat stalks needed to bite through crystallized water, shear through drifts that had frozen overnight into concrete hard barriers. Too aggressive, and the blades jammed. Too gentle, and they simply polished the surface. Snow varies. Fresh powder, wet slush, ice-crusted drifts, packed snow compressed by traffic. Each type required different blade angles, different rotation speeds, different fan pressures. A wheat thresher dealt with one consistent material. Time equals 5 milliseconds / Arthur's machine needed to handle 5. And snow is heavy. Moving it requires power, serious power, power that didn't exist in 1894. Not in a mobile form. Steam engines were massive, stationary things. Electric motors demanded infrastructure Quebec farms didn't have. Horses could pull plows, but couldn't generate the rotational force needed to drive an auger system. So Arthur waited, worked, experimented. He started with hand-cranked models, built miniature versions using whatever materials he could scavenge from the farm. Scrap metal, broken equipment, parts salvaged from worn-out machinery. Testing concepts. Most failed immediately. The auger would seize, the fan would clog, the housing would crack under the force. The successful tests were almost worse. They proved the concept could work at small scale, which meant the next challenge was scaling up. Making it bigger meant exponentially more force, more weight, more stress on every component. A blade angle that worked on a tabletop model would shatter when subjected to real-world loads. Years passed. Arthur married Marie, had children, ran the dairy farm, delivered milk through winters that seemed designed specifically. Time equals 3 milliseconds greater than to mock his ambitions. And every night, when the work was done, he'd return to the workshop, adjust a blade angle, try a different fan design, sketch modifications on papers that accumulated in stacks. His family learned to recognize the signs. When Arthur went quiet at dinner, staring at nothing, they knew he was thinking about ratios, gear ratios, blade-to-fan ratios, power-to-weight ratios, the mathematics of moving snow. The internal combustion engine changed everything. By the early 1920s, gasoline engines had evolved from temperamental experiments into reliable power sources. Four-wheel drive trucks appeared, capable of handling rough terrain. Suddenly, Arthur had what he'd been missing: mobile, powerful, reliable energy. He was 47 years old, had been working on this problem for 29 years. The breakthrough model combined three separate systems: a four-wheel drive truck chassis and motor for mobility, a second motor dedicated entirely to driving the snow removal mechanism, and the mechanism itself, a front-mounted scooper with auger blades feeding into a fan powerful enough to propel snow nearly 100 feet. The design was elegant in its directness: drive the truck forward into the snow. The auger blades, rotating like a corkscrew, pulled slow inward, broke it apart, fed it to the fan. The fan, spinning at tremendous speed, caught the shattered snow and hurled it through adjustable chutes. Point the chute to the side of the road or into the back of a following truck. He called it La déneigeuse et souffleuse à neige Sicard, the Sicard snow remover Snowblower. 1925. Demonstrations in Montreal. City officials, skeptical men who'd seen countless inventions fail, watched Arthur's machine attack snow that had paralyzed traffic for days. The truck advanced into a drift taller than a man, the auger engaged. Snow disappeared into the mechanism, the fan roared, and suddenly, spectacularly, a white plume arced through the air, landing 90 feet away. The truck kept moving, the drift vanished. Behind the machine, bare pavement. The officials stopped being skeptical. Montreal in the 1920s faced a crisis of its own making. Between 1880 and 1927, the city's population tripled. Streets designed for horses now choked with automobiles. Winter had always been an inconvenience. Now it became an economic disaster. Time equals 5 milliseconds / every snowstorm shut down commerce, trapped workers, isolated neighborhoods. The city employed thousands of men with shovels, spent fortunes on horse-drawn plows, and still couldn't keep up. Arthur Sicard offered a solution that seemed almost miraculous. One machine doing the work of dozens of men, operating day or night, clearing streets in hours instead of days. The town of Outremont purchased the first Sicard snowblower in 1927 for $13,000, equivalent to roughly $224,000 today. Montreal followed immediately. By 1928, Sicard machines were clearing city streets, their distinctive roar announcing winter's retreat. The impact was immediate and profound. Streets that had remained buried for weeks suddenly cleared overnight. Businesses stayed open through snowstorms. Emergency vehicles could respond regardless of conditions. Montreal, a city that had struggled against winter, suddenly had winter under control. Sicard founded his company, hired workers, built a factory in Sainte-Thérèse. Orders arrived from across Canada, from northern American cities desperate for the technology. The machines evolved: more powerful engines, improved auger designs, better fan systems. But the fundamental concept, the idea that crystallized watching a wheat thresher in 1894, remained unchanged. Other innovations followed. Sicard didn't stop at snow. He engineered highway tractors, dump trucks, street sweepers, garbage trucks. The mind that spent 31 years perfecting one machine proved capable of revolutionizing multiple industries. Quebec government pamphlets from 1938 described the Sicard snowblower as an insatiable monster that devoured snow and expelled it 23 meters away. The description captured something essential. This wasn't a polite machine. Time equals 450 milliseconds / it attacked winter with mechanical violence, refused to accept snow as inevitable. September 13th, 1946. Arthur Sicard dies at age 69. Montreal names a street after him, Rue Sicard, 2 blocks from the factory where his machines were built. The Canadian Encyclopedia later writes that he was hailed as a genius who changed the city's relationship with winter. That phrase deserves examination. Changed the city's relationship with winter. Before Sicard, winter was something you endured. Streets closed, life slowed, you waited for spring. The very geography of Canadian cities, time equals 3 milliseconds greater than reflected this acceptance. Narrow streets that couldn't be cleared, neighborhoods designed around the assumption that winter meant isolation. After Sicard, winter became manageable. Not pleasant, not eliminated, but controllable. Cities could function year-round. Roads stayed open. Commerce continued. The fundamental economic reality of northern cities transformed from seasonal to permanent. Consider the scope. Montreal now employs 3,000 workers to operate snow removal equipment across 10,000 kilometers of city streets. They move 300,000 truckloads of snow every year at a cost exceeding $170 million annually. This entire infrastructure, this massive municipal operation, traces directly to one farmer who couldn't stop thinking about a grain thresher. The technology spread globally. Northern cities from Toronto to Minneapolis to Stockholm adopted variations of Sicard's design. His company, now Sicard Industries, continues manufacturing snow removal equipment decades after his death. The modern machines bear little resemblance to that first prototype, but the principle remains. Auger, fan, mobile power source. Return to that workshop. Time equals 5 milliseconds / 4,713 descents into a space lit by kerosene, heated by obsession. 31 years from inspiration to implementation. Most people would have quit. The reasonable response to 2 years of failure is abandonment. 5 years, certainly. A decade represents extraordinary persistence. 31 years suggests something beyond persistence, something closer to compulsion. Arthur Sicard saw a problem, snow paralyzing his community, and refused to accept it as unsolvable. Refused even when the technology didn't exist to implement his solution. He held the concept in his mind. For 3 decades, waiting for the world to catch up, for engines to be invented that could power what he'd imagined. That patience, that stubborn certainty, changed how millions of people experience winter. Every cleared street, every open road, every functional city in a snowstorm carries his legacy. A dairy farmer who thought about wheat and saw snow, who spent 31 years in a workshop because giving up never occurred to him as an option. The last model Arthur built sits in a museum now, metal worn smooth by use, paint faded, a relic of mechanical history. But across Montreal, across Canada, across every northern city where snow falls and streets remain clear, his machine's descendants still roar, still attack winter with mechanical certainty, still insist that snow, that ancient enemy, can be moved.